What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another Angle of Pursuit podcast, your fantasy football home over at fakepigskin.com. I'm your host, Kyle Robert. You can follow me on Twitter at NotoriousKRO. With me tonight, it's Damian Dabrowski. What's up, Damian?
This is like the best week of the season, Kyle. I think before football actually starts, that the biggest draft week, but it's kind of like you've been having that itch for a couple weeks now, and it's almost like you got to fight that urge to just join like 45 leagues and get so lost. But
I think that's definitively called pulling a Ron, just jumping in like 100 leagues right before the draft.
Yeah, no, but it's like that perfect kind of culmination of a lot of different things where kind of you're at the pinnacle of excitement for football, and it's a good place to be.
It's like Christmas morning for me. Seriously, like all week. Ohio State kicks off on Thursday. I have the rest of my drafts this weekend. We'll have NFL next week. Like, it's amazing time, and there's still time, folks. Head over to playdraft.com/fakepigskin. Download the app, the draft app, and put in the promo code fakepigskin. Put in $5. You get a year of Fake Pigskin Elite. You also get an extra $3 ticket for a contest. If there's still time to draft your best ball teams, and if you want to, you're itching, you want to get a few more drafts in before the season starts, but don't want to have to worry about the trades and the waiver wire and the in-season management, the computer will do it all for you. There's no trades, there's no waiver wire. If you have injuries, they'll put in your best players. So if your best player, one of your good players gets injured one week and they're in your starting lineup, they're out of your starting lineup all of a sudden, and your better players go in, your scores go in, and it's a fun season-long experience as well as a DFS component. So make sure you head over to playdraft.com/fakepigskin or download the app from iTunes or the Google Play Store. Put promo code fakepigskin in, put $5 in, and you won't be disappointed. So Damian, over the weekend we did a Angle of Pursuit podcast league, and I'll quickly break it down for everybody. It's a 12-team league. We tweaked it a little bit. We have 3 wide receivers, 2 running backs, obviously a quarterback, a tight end, and then we did 2 flex spots, which you can play a wide receiver, a running back, or a tight end, and then no kickers because kickers are the worst. Ask Keith Cummings. And we added a defense just for shits and giggles. So, Damian, did you have kind of a general strategy heading in to your draft, and then kind of what was how did that play out, and kind of what did you end up doing?
Well, we almost didn't have a draft because Commissioner Kyle attempted another sabotage where we somehow
Can we talk about how awesome my commissioner skills are? Every time I set up a league for one of the podcasts, it goes horribly wrong. I forget to click like 7 boxes, and it's a constant scramble. But it just gave everybody 3 more hours to prep for the draft. That's all.
Yeah, well, I think the real takeaway from this is when you screwed up the baseball league on ESPN, it was basically an excuse for me to complain about why I didn't like the ESPN platform. So clearly you weren't fond of that, so you decided to get back at me and screw it up on Yahoo. So this way I took you took away the joy of me being able to tell you why it's better on here. So if you're nothing if not consistent, Kyle.
Absolutely, it's not site dependent, it's me dependent, and if I set it up. That's why I love my long-standing leagues where I'm the commissioner, because I set them up once, I got them right the first time, and haven't had to mess with them since. So what's up with your team? What was your general strategy, and kind of how did it come out?
Well, so, we didn't know the order until, a half hour before. I ended up getting the number 2 overall pick in the traditional snake here.
Play the conspiracy theory music over this, because I set up the league. You're in the league. I got the first pick. You got the second pick.
Yeah. Well, at least we threw Ben at the end, so nobody could complain.
Threw him off the scent. Nobody knows.
So honestly, in basically any type of traditional, even essentially, as long as it's not one of those weird scoring formats like the fishbowl or some tight end premium league, I think. In almost every other format, the 1-2 pick is David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell for me every single time.
Yep.
Standard, half PPR, full PPR, doesn't matter. I guess I have it Johnson, Bell, but they're close, and I can understand somebody going the other way around as long as it's those 2 guys. So once you took Johnson off the board at number one. I knew I was going Bell, so that made it easy. And honestly, I haven't really been able to quite figure out, what's kind of the ideal spot to be at this year in the first round. I like having one of the top three picks, if you will, just because I'm pretty confident in Brown being the third guy there.
Yeah.
Just because I think those three players, I don't have any questions about them. I feel really good making that pick. The one problem is I don't really love kind of on the back end, the end of the second round, the start of the third there. I just think there's not really if I have a couple guys that like that, if they drop, I'm happy about, but
Yep.
if they don't, it's a tough spot to be. So in this case, it worked out okay. In the sense that I ended up getting Gurley at the end of the second there, who I wasn't very high on going into the year, but I've kind of, gotten a little bit higher on as the preseason has gone on, just in terms of how that offense has looked. And I think there's really no way they can be as bad as they were last year. So basically having, two workhorse running backs that I'm going to have in there every week, that are going to be getting 20 touches for me. It is a good place to be, just because you kind of gives you a leg up on some of the other players that might have not been able to get those running backs early. So I was okay with that, but it kind of left me to take Demaryius Thomas at the start of the third as kind of my number one receiver, which I could live with, but I would have really loved if somebody like Doug Baldwin or Brandon Cooks had fallen there. So it's kind of the price you're paying for having the premium at running back. But that's basically how I went. So I mean, we were picking right next to each other, Kyle, with you being number one. So let's kind of hear your take on how those first couple rounds went.
Yeah, I guess for me, I'm very traditionally a wide receiver heavy leaning guy, especially early, and then I take my shots on running back. And in this draft, I went the exact opposite. Obviously, I took David Johnson early, but as you mentioned, Doug Baldwin was gone, Brandon Cooks was gone. I didn't really feel like going in on Demaryius. Like, he's fine kind of in that middle to late of the third, but I wanted to try something a little bit different, see how I felt about my team. I took Dalvin Cook with my second pick. I hate going running back, but that's just kind of the way it worked out. I like Dalvin Cook. I think he has the potential to be the best rookie running back this season. I think there's a lot of upside. I think he has top 10, top 12 type upside. So I went there, and then I went and grabbed Travis Kelce with my third pick. Again, I hate drafting tight ends early, but Kelce was there. There wasn't a lot of other stuff kind of jumping off the board for me, and I grabbed him. My receiving core, we start 3 receivers, and you could start up to 5. Obviously, they went off the board quickly. Like my top receivers are Martavis Bryant, Jamison Crowder, Deshaun Jackson. Guys guys I think can be really good, but at the same time, when those are your wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, I don't feel wonderful about that. Damian, was this kind of do you traditionally start kind of running back heavy in most drafts, or is this just kind of how the draft fell to you?
No, it was really just kind of a result of what pick I had, because if the draft had fallen any other way, I really can't imagine starting my team with consecutive running backs, because I've always gone receiver heavy, and especially kind of the top, I'd say 12 receivers for me this year. I feel very strongly about it, in the sense that if I can grab 2 of those guys, I feel good about it, or if not, then at least one of them in the second round. So it was a little bit different, and then because of that, I guess I was playing a little bit of catch up. I ended up taking Allen Robinson in the fourth, and that's kind of the issue there. You can look at my team in the sense that, okay, with Thomas and Robinson as my top 2 receivers, I have 2 guys that, just from a physical standpoint, I mean, they can have 1,500-yard seasons, double-digit touchdowns, because we've seen both of them do it. And from a metrics perspective, I mean, they're freak athletes. They're exactly what you would build a number 1 receiver to look like. On the other hand, their respective quarterbacks are Trevor Siemian and Blake Bortles. So it's and we saw how much that can torpedo a receiver with what DeAndre Hopkins dealt with last year, or even Robinson himself with Bortles. So I guess the way I looked at it is, at that point, I just wanted to take the most talented player, and just hope that they can overcome that situation. I mean, Robinson did it already with Bortles once, and then obviously last year was the disaster. So I'm guessing I guess the most accurate projection should be somewhere in between those 2 extremes, which I'm okay with. And we talked about it when we had Frank on. with Thomas, the fact that the Broncos have such a narrow passing tree in terms of really not incorporating too many guys there beyond him and Sanders. So I just felt comfortable knowing I was going to get the targets from him there. And I guess I say I don't feel great about it, but I must have felt good enough about it to really take a little break from receiver, because then I ended up getting, Greg Olsen in the fifth and Mike Gillislee in the sixth, which I just wanted some stability at that point. I think Olsen was just better than, some of the receivers that were left at that point. Admittedly, you had taken Crowder the pick before, which I would have taken if he had fallen. So that was part of the reason there. But I figured, Olsen, while he might not have the ceiling of somebody like Jordan Reed or Gronk, I do think he's one of the safer tight ends on the board in terms of giving you, 60 yards basically every single week. So I think with some of the volatility I may have with Robinson there, it was good to kind of get a little bit of stability there in that pick. And then Gillislee, I don't necessarily need him. He's a flex for me. I mean, it's weird saying that about somebody you took in the sixth round, but I just mean that in the sense that, if I have a receiver or somebody that I took later hit, and it turns out that, the Pats are just full committee and Gillislee's really only getting 10, 12 touches a game, then it's not going to sink me. I'm not relying on him to be an RB2 necessarily, assuming Gurley and Bell stay healthy. So I'm okay with that. And then kind of with the next few picks there went Brandon Marshall, who I hate that pick. I don't know why I made it. There's really I don't know. I'm not even going to try to explain it. I just kind of, I didn't have like the most prep for this draft in terms of trying to figure out how it was going to play out, minute on the timer. And it's kind of just like, okay, he should be good, right? It's Brandon Marshall, but he can very easily be, somebody that I'm not going to be playing, 6 weeks into the season, but I'm okay with it just because I got Chris Hogan 2 rounds later, who, we'll talk about later here, but I think he's in store for a big season. So I'll be good on that, but kind of what, how did the middle rounds go for you?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting kind of with the mix of people we had doing this draft. It definitely opened up a lot of wild cards, a lot of variables that, kept us on our toes. So I think that made it very interesting. Taking Cook, taking Kelsey, like I love those players a lot. And, in a vacuum, love them, think they're amazing. But I just felt like I was chasing. And I feel like I have a lot of volatility. Obviously, David Johnson, obviously, Travis Kelce. I mean, I can pencil in those guys' numbers, be pretty confident that I'm going to come within a pretty soft range of that, and then, be okay there. But, like, I went Jameis Winston. I took Martavis Bryant. I took Deshaun Jackson. Tyro Williams, hopefully he, I'm high on him being a thing again this year. Randall Cobb, bounce back. I'm in on that. Ted Ginn. I went, after locking in those 2 running backs, I got P. Ryan, I got Procise. So I don't know, like those are kind of real wild card tickets in terms of running backs. I took a shot on the Patriots receiving core as well by taking Malcolm Mitchell, a guy that I'm really excited about. So I don't know, it's definitely interesting. I definitely felt like I was chasing, and I felt like at several points of the draft that I had 2 receivers I was waiting to fall to me, or I was waiting for Ty Montgomery to fall to me. And, every time I went for that, they go a couple picks before me or right before me. And, I end up kind of scrambling at that point. So it was an interesting draft overall. I do think it was interesting. Our baseball co-host Ben Rolfe decided that in a half-point PPR where you can start up to at least 3 and up to 5 receivers, he went 4 running backs off the top, took Zeke Elliott with his 112, and then took Ajayi, took Lamar Miller, and took Ty Montgomery. Obviously, Miller, Montgomery, and Ajayi to some extent, they're all pass catchers, so, I mean, I give them a little bit of credit for that, but it was definitely a bold strategy, Cotton.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, with the time difference, Ben's not here to defend himself, because I have no clue what he was thinking. And I mean, this was an issue for not just him, but for us. I think when you're on the end, just having to wait, 20, 22 picks between making selections, it just makes it really tough to plan. You think you're getting a couple guys and then they go off the board, and all of a sudden, if it's a situation where there's really only 2 guys left in that tier at a position, you might get forced into a situation where you're taking players at a position that you're already, pretty set at, but you think that value is going to be better than settling for somebody that you're reaching a round or two for. But I do think Ben took it to the extreme. I've made it clear that I'm not a fan of taking Zeke in the first 2 rounds in a regular draft. I think best ball's different, but in kind of the traditional format here. But it's not even because I can see a case for all 4 of the guys he took, those 4 running backs that you mentioned. But then he took Jordan Reed, in the 5th, and Terrence West in the 7th. So now you have 5 running backs through the 7 rounds. His number 1 receiver is Pierre Garçon, who I like, but I like him as my 4th receiver, not as my 1st receiver. And then he's got Corey Coleman, Mike Wallace, Cole Beasley. That's your top 4 there. I don't really see a path to any of those guys getting double-digit touchdowns, which. Again, if you have 4 running backs that scored 12 touchdowns, then I guess it's really not going to matter. But I guess Ben's confident maybe that he's going to be able to pull off, a couple deals here and trade for some receiver help.
I feel like he's going to be scrambling on the waiver wire for 3 receivers to start every week. Obviously, there are some other teams that went a lot more receiver heavy, so I got a feeling he could find a partner. If Zeke had fallen to me, that's kind of been my stance, but if Zeke had fallen to me at the end of the second, I might have considered him. But in a league this deep where you're starting this many players, it is a lot harder to take a shot on someone like that, to sit on your bench, especially that early. So, in a league where we're starting, five up to 5 receivers plus 2 running backs, 7 skill guys, it's really hard to kind of take that gamble so early. The 4th round was kind of the wild card round kind of in general. Kareem Hunt, obviously a beneficiary of the Spencer Ware news. Make sure you go check out the podcast. Evan Silva is going to be joining us to talk, the Patriots, to talk the Chiefs, to talk a bunch of good stuff, rookie running backs. So check that out if you haven't already done so. But, 3rd, 4th round for Kareem Hunt, I don't know if it's that crazy. Devontae Parker, another guy that I really wanted and kind of was hoping to land, ended up being 3 picks in front of me basically. A guy I love this year. So if I'm looking at Devontae Parker and Larry Fitzgerald instead of Martavis Bryant and Jamison Crowder, I think I feel better about where my receiving core heads. But the receivers were going hot and fast, and guys like Kelvin Benjamin, guys like Terrell Pryor that are 4th round, 5th round picks, Crabtree, 6th round picks, all ended up going a little bit earlier just because of the run on receivers.
Yeah, for sure. And, you were able to kind of get in on that a little bit, taking 5 really consecutive receivers, rounds 4 to 8 there. Aside from taking Crowder, I was hoping to get Tyrell there as well when you took him a pick before me. So that's kind of what threw me off a little bit. That's kind of how I got stuck with Brandon Marshall when Tyrell went. And then, but I guess the way I looked at it is, I mentioned I took Hogan, but then I took Theo Riddick and Rashard Matthews in the 10th and 11th which I really like, just because picks. I think they're really good floor guys. Uh-huh. Like I said, they don't have a great ceiling, but I know that I can play Riddick every week as a flex, and he's going to get me, 70 total yards and a couple catches. And Rashard Matthews, I think, is just getting – he was terrific for essentially 12 consecutive weeks last year. And just because, they brought in Decker and signed Corey Davis, people are kind of dismissing him. And I still think he should be the highest drafted Titans wide receiver in redraft. Obviously not in Dynasty, but I think there's a lot of value there and a very high floor, which is good because it kind of gave me the freedom to, with my last couple of picks, I took Latavius Murray, who I don't necessarily love, but, if Dalvin Cook's not what he's made out to be, at least early in the season, that's a guy that I could use in the right matchup. And then just a couple dart throws with, Sherkandrick West in case Hunt doesn't pan out, and Jonathan Williams in Buffalo in case McCoy gets hurt, which we've seen him do, on several occasions last year.
And those are both 2 guys that, even if theoretically, their starters don't go down or in Kareem Hunt's solid, you could still play them as borderline flex options. They're going to give you that safety reliability. We saw it last year. Williams, was a guy, or the backup, I guess, in Buffalo the last 2 years has been a guy who can get, 8 touchdowns. And the guy who in Sharkandrick West, even if we don't assume that Kareem Hunt is bad, Sharkhandrick West should still get enough touches to, if you have to play him in a pinch, you can find a way to get him in there, and he won't give you a goose egg or like 2 points. So I like both those picks a lot. I took Malcolm Mitchell. I took Nelson Aguilar. I took CJ Prosise. Those are kind of my lottery tickets. And I actually grabbed a second tight end in this format too, because with those 2 flex spots, I feel like Cameron Brate's kind of a safe guy that I can throw in there. And obviously Jameis likes him, 8 touchdowns last year. I could see myself playing Kelsey and Brate, some weeks when I have to, when the matchup dictates it and I'm dealing with bye weeks and whatnot, I could see myself kind of running and making that work.
Yeah, I consider that. I had Charles Clay kind of on my board in those last few rounds, and I think he went undrafted, so he's still in free agency now. Maybe somebody I might look to add, but I realized, as much as I like Hogan and Rashard Matthews, I kind of didn't really take any receivers after those two. So, essentially having only 5 receivers in a spot where you can play up to 5, I kind of wanted to take one more, which is why I ended up taking Marquise Lee with my last pick, which, we just talked about how I wasn't sure Robinson could sustain himself with Bortles. So I guess using that reasoning, I don't know how I expect the second receiver on that team to have value, but he's another freak athlete who we've seen, string together some good games last season. I think he's going to be clearly ahead of Hearns on the depth chart going into this year. So, if for some reason Blake Bortles, turns into someone else overnight, then that could pay off.
Absolutely. So yeah, it was a fun little league. We're going to do it this whole season. Hopefully the goal is for this, if someone else wins it, we'll have them on the podcast. We'll talk about their team, kind of how everything panned out and all that good stuff. But just wanted to give you guys a little insight onto kind of what we're thinking when we're doing a draft and kind of what we're planning on, and when things don't go according to plan and when things get a little wonky and you have to kind of adjust on the fly, and things are going to have to do in the draft. So good luck to all of you that have upcoming drafts this weekend. Make sure you check out our YouTube page. It is full of video content. Recorded a bunch of stuff with Ben Rolfe yesterday talking about his favorite undervalued, overvalued players at all the positions. We also are, going to be joined by Evan Silva, so make sure you check that out. That should be a lot of great content. But for Damian Dabrowski, I'm Kyle Robert, and we'll talk to you guys next time.